to the public accountability meeting, which is going to focus on antisocial behaviour today. Before I move on to the formal agenda, I would like those in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with the Chief Constable, Rachel Bacon.
Hello everyone, I'm Rachel Bacon, Chief Constable of Durham Constabulary. Shall I get my team to introduce themselves, Joy?
Yes, please.
Morning everybody, I'm Kieran Irving, I'm the Deputy Chief Constable.
Good morning, I'm Chief Superintendent Steve Long and I'm the local policing commander.
Morning, I'm Rich Allen, one of the Assistant Chief Constables.
Morning, I'm John McAdam, the other Assistant Chief Constable.
Thanks,
You,
Joy.
And Andrea, just want to introduce yourself and the team.
Morning everyone, I'm Andrea Petty, I'm the Chief of Staff for the PCC's office, and we have Charlotte Pickering who's supporting the IT and recording, and also Nick Moore. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to frame the session today, in 2021, I became the first PCC in the country to appoint an antisocial behaviour champion, and we put victims front and centre and really looked at the journey that they have through the justice system. And this was really in a direct response to Baroness Newlove's landmark report, Living a Nightmare. And so it's quite timely today that we are looking at antisocial behaviour in light of the final publication of Baroness Newlove's annual report, focusing on that. So we have made a lot of progress, which we'll hear today. I also broke the ground by giving victims the right to attend their own case reviews and speak about the impact on their lives. This is now the national standard. And we're not standing still. I've recently boosted funding for the ASB case review process. We've brought in a dedicated review coordinator to give victims a single, consistent point of contact. And we've also appointed an independent volunteer chairs to strengthen our oversight. And again, this is something that Baroness Newlove identified in the original report. And these are all ahead of the new legal duties for police and crime commissioners that's introduced in April. As you may know, I believe in leading from the front, acting early, setting the standard and consistently raising the bar. And I think I'm really fortunate that I have a force that has a similar ways, which we'll hear about from leadership from the Chief Constable. On top of this, I recently supported the introduction of a new recording tool for antisocial behaviour incidents within the force, and my operations service manager worked alongside the force to ensure the system can effectively identify cases that should be referred for support, as well as those that meet the local antisocial behaviour case review criteria. It's absolutely true that antisocial behaviour ruins lives and has a ripple effect across our communities. It shatters confidence and trust. Unfortunately, we've recognised very early on in Durham that we can do much more than the bare minimum. That's why great effort is taken to listen and learn from experience of antisocial behaviour and to deliver meaningful solutions. Antisocial behaviour remains one of the top 5 priorities of the public. My snapshot survey for this meeting highlights that some of the old problems still remain. Off-road bikes and e-scooters remain the most common form of antisocial behaviour that people are experiencing in the communities. And almost half of the respondents had experienced antisocial behaviour did not report it to the police because they did feel that nothing would be done about it. And hopefully the conversations that we have today will encourage more people to come forward and report antisocial behaviour that's occurring in their communities. And when we ask the public there's a one thing that would improve how ASB is dealt with, the most frequent answer was increased policing presence and targeted and regular patrols. So despite the hard work, there remains much more to do. And this is the way that obviously this opportunity today is to set out what we are doing to respond to some of the concerns that's been raised. And since 2021, they've secured an extra 4 million in external funding to deliver strong, effective and above all visible policing in the communities that our communities want. And this has led to our officers, nearly 20,000 officers of patrols and wardens on the street, and absolutely exceptional partnership work between those in the communities who are visible, who are ununiformed, who are working collectively together to address antisocial behaviour. You will shortly hear from Chief Superintendent Long on the success of Operation PAVE, but to give you some recent results, in the year ending March 2026, there was a 14.3% decrease in the number of recorded drug-related antisocial behaviour incidents compared to the previous year. However, there was a significant increase in the numbers of youth and alcohol-related incidents, 41.9%. This can largely be seen as an effect of increased patrols in hotspot areas, detecting antisocial behaviour and increased confidence from the public to report issues. I know, from what I hear from the public and obviously my inbox as well, that the public really values this visible policing. It's also critical that we tackle the reasons why people offend in the first place. My police, crime and justice plan recognises that and takes ambitious steps to address the risks that can escalate into crime and antisocial behaviour later down the line. So I'm continuing to support the force and partners and investing in problem-orientated policing, otherwise known as POP, where we bring partners together to get ahead of the issue, no matter which matter most to residents. And this isn't about reacting after damage is done. It is about tackling the root causes head on, cutting crime, reducing fear and rebuilding confidence. That means backing practical solutions, new facilities, targeted resources and real opportunities that make a visible difference in our communities. And some of the recent projects I supported include free football sessions in Spennymoor for youngsters aged 7 to 16 with Spennymoor Town FC to address public concerns around antisocial behaviour in the town centre. The aim has been to fill existing gaps in provision after school and in the evenings to help divert young people from engaging in ESB. And we've done this in other towns across the Force area too. And I also provided the Cornfish Partnership with funding to support the work of the Newton Aycliffe Youth Club Centre to keep young people safe and to prevent their involvement in crime and antisocial behaviour. Newton Aycliffe has a long-standing issues with antisocial behaviour, and the town is already one of 15 hotspot areas benefiting from extra high visibility patrols to tackle antisocial behaviour and serious violence funded by government and secured by my office. These two projects and other problem-orientated policing plans have also something in common. They're designed by the people on the ground at the front end of the problems and rely very heavily on community input and support. For me, this is very much the future of our antisocial behaviour work, alongside enhancing our existing interventions, working with partners and with those already committing ASB and those at risk. And putting a strong focus on families because real change starts at home. If we want to shift attitudes and behaviours in young people, their families have to be part of that journey and back those values every step of the way. Community safety isn't someone else's job, it's everyone's job. And by working together as one team, we can build safer, stronger and more resilient communities for everyone. So thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us to hear about our work to tackle ASB. I'm now going to hand over to the Chief Constable to say a few introductory words before we deliver the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to those who are joining us today. The focus of today's meeting, as you know, is antisocial behaviour, and in particular, how we are preventing and deterring both youth and adult ASB across County Durham and Darlington. Antisocial behaviour remains one of the issues that you tell us matters most. It affects your sense of safety, confidence and pride in where you live, and therefore deserves a strong and visible response from policing and our partners. Prevention is central to my approach as Chief Constable, and one of the 4 pillars of my delivery plan is dedicated to prevention and early intervention, because we know that the most effective way to reduce crime in ASB is to stop problems from escalating in the first place. That means identifying risk early, supporting individuals and families, working closely with partners, and addressing the causes of behaviour before enforcement becomes necessary. Through Operation Drive, our force-wide approach to tackling ASB, we work with you and your communities to understand the issues affecting you and deliver long-term solutions rather than simply responding to individual incidents. For young people, our focus is on prevention first, and we do work closely with schools, youth services, families and community groups to provide support and positive opportunities. Help prevent behaviour from developing into criminality. Most young people contribute positively to our communities, and our aim is to keep them on that path. And over the last 12 months, we've also used a range of powers to tackle ASB, including community protection warnings, community protection notices, criminal behaviour orders and disposal orders. We've also worked alongside local authorities, housing providers, licensing teams and community safety partnerships to address repeat offenders, problem locations and the issues causing concern within our communities. So to be clear, it is prevention and early intervention, but it's strong and swift action in communities when things have escalated and become repeat. We're also increasingly using data, intelligence and community feedback to focus our activity where it has the greatest impact. Through hotspot policing, visible patrols and data analytics, we're able to identify emerging issues, target resources effectively and better understand what matters to most local people. Preventing antisocial behaviour is not something policing can achieve alone, but together with our partners and you and your communities, we can make a real difference. I look forward to today's discussion and the opportunity to demonstrate how our commitment to prevention is helping to build safer, stronger and more confident communities across County Durham and Darlington. And I'll now hand over to Chief Superintendent Long, who will deliver the force's approach to antisocial behaviour. Thank you, Steve.
Good morning. Do you want me to share my screen or will the presentation be coming up? Share my screen, yeah. Is that coming through okay?
Yes, if we just put it on the slideshow, Steve, that would be great. Thank you.
A little bit of outline.
So,
Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, good morning. So I'm Steve Long, I'm the local policing commander and I've got a responsibility for neighbourhood policing. I'm going to do a short presentation on preventing and deterring antisocial behaviour. So I think it's important that we start off with the strategic objectives that underpin how we deliver our response to antisocial behaviour across the force area. It is a priority for the force and the strategic objectives set both nationally and locally in relation to ASB. The strategic objectives which drive the operational delivery are shown on the slide, and I'm going to start with the neighbourhood policing guarantee. I think it's important to that everyone understands the uplift of police officers and PCSOs over the last 12 months into neighbourhood policing teams. So in 2025, there was an uplift of 24 police officers and 3 PCSOs into neighbourhood policing teams, specifically to tackle ASB and criminality in communities. And there will be a further increase of 19 police officers planned in over the next 10 months. And this further strengthens the force operating model, which has neighbourhood policing embedded in communities. The Chief Constable's delivery plan specifically identifies early intervention and prevention and problem solving as key to reducing the impact of ASB. The OPCC Police and Crime Plan identifies safer neighbourhoods as a core element, and both the Safer Durham Partnership and the Darlington Community Safety Partnership have tackling ASB as a priority area. Presentation today is going to concentrate on 6 key principles. Antisocial behaviour, in terms of the overview from the force, can only be done with partners to reduce harm and prevent ASB, and I think that's important and is an underlying principle throughout the presentation. There are 6 key areas. The first is early intervention and prevention, problem-solving approaches, effective use of powers to tackle ASB, partnership working, community engagement, and hotspot policing. In terms of early intervention and prevention, it is important that we spot the first signs of ASB as soon as possible, using our intelligence reports, reports on the force website, police.uk, and community feedback through PAC meetings to act before issues escalate. We share information with our partners as we cannot tackle ASB in isolation, so we work closely with partner agencies such as the local authority, schools, and housing to share relevant information and build a complete picture of risk and vulnerability. We also work very closely with schools and youth services in order to educate young people, build trust, and divert individuals away from antisocial behaviour at an early stage. It's also important that we provide support to families who are experiencing difficulties. This addresses the underlying issues such as safeguarding, parenting challenges, or vulnerability which can lead to involvement in ASB. And we also work closely with a range of partners around designing out ASB. That's through environmental design such as improved lighting, CCTV, or changes to public spaces which help to keep communities safe and, importantly, help people to feel safe in communities. And then fundamentally, it's about reducing ASB, which can lead to further criminality. We know it's a gateway offending issue, which can lead to much more serious criminality. So we take early, proportionate action to stop behaviours developing into more serious offences. And we focus on prevention rather than enforcement where possible. So at the heart of what we do in terms of our neighbourhood policing drive against ASB is around our problem-solving approach. The Chief Constable mentioned Operation Drive, which is the tactical framework for operational delivery, and all neighbourhood policing teams are trained in problem-solving to deal with the underlying issues of ASB. They are also supported by a team of specialist problem solvers who receive further training and are deployed across the force area to ensure that we promulgate best practice, identify where we have gaps in service provision, and provide tactical advice to our neighbourhood teams. Drive, the force-wide operation, is led by neighbourhood policing to prevent ASB and has prevention and problem solving at the centre of the strategy. The force has delivered a number of interventions across the entire force area under the banner of Operation Drive, tackling off-road bikes and e-scooters, antisocial driving on the road network, and arson prevention amongst a whole range of initiatives. The force has documented problem-solving plans in place where ASB is a sustained issue, and a monthly meeting is chaired by the neighbourhood superintendent to ensure that all neighbourhood inspectors are focused on tackling ASB in their areas of responsibility. Currently, the force is working hard to tackle antisocial behaviour in bus stations, town centres, retail parks, and in our rural areas. We are adopting better use of drones to support policing operations, especially in relation to off-road bike nuisance. We're working with partners to secure derelict buildings that attract young people, and we are currently preparing for the summer holidays when we know demand will increase significantly. So Operation Drive aims to disrupt ASB and criminality. It's about reassurance in communities, providing visible patrols in key locations, intervening with sustainable solutions alongside our partners, and engaging with communities to understand their concerns. It's also important to note that although early intervention and prevention is really important, there are also a range of powers, and effective use of powers is important for the force in deterring ASB. The force has recognised that we need to be more consistent in relation to how, when, and where we use the full range of powers that are available. We have therefore introduced a new dedicated team who are specialists in the use of powers to tackle ASB. The team work closely with neighbourhood policing teams to ensure that we consistently and effectively utilise the legislation available to tackle repeat offenders and intervene early to prevent escalation of criminality. It's important that the public feel safe in their communities, and these powers are really effective. So as you can see from the slide, over the last 12 months, there's been 219 community protection warnings, 54 community protection notices, 38 criminal behaviour orders, 33 dispersal orders across the force area. We also work closely with our licensing colleagues at the local authority, and we take action through licence revocation where we know there are off sales and off licences for underage drinking, or where we've got problematic premises where ASB occurs. And we also work closely with trading standards to tackle the illegal sales of vapes. We also work with the local authority to develop public space protection orders, and there's been some really successful work in both Durham and Darlington in relation to that. We're also developing criminal behaviour orders for organised crime groups, where ASB is linked and attracts young people into serious criminality. And of course, we use off-road bike legislation to target those who are utilising or using off-road bikes in our communities, and we work with housing associations through tenancy enforcement to support that work. As I've alluded to earlier in the presentation, partnership working is key. Force cannot tackle ASB in isolation. It's often driven by a number of factors, and partners have their own statutory responsibilities to prevent and deter antisocial behaviour. Community safety partnerships, Durham and Darlington, where we work jointly with statutory partners to coordinate activity and share responsibility for tackling ASB at a strategic level. There is an antisocial behaviour strategic group that provides oversight, governance and direction for priorities and performance, and is a multi-agency arrangement chaired by the Force Neighbourhood Superintendent. This group oversees activity where there are sustained ASB actions that require action and is beyond a single agency intervention. Our local multi-agency problem solving meetings, or LMAPs, that brings together police, council, housing, third sector partners to address specific local issues collaboratively at an operational level. As I've said, we work closely with licensing and housing partnerships to tackle ASB, and we've got a strong relationship with the fire service, where we tackle issues such as deliberate fires that relate to ASB. And the actual photograph that you can see on there is a really good case study, which shows some of the work with the fire service recently and the local authority, where we've been conducting multi-agency patrols after a spate of fires in the nature reserves. This resulted in 6 youths being identified locally. 1 was referred to youth offending, and the others will be carrying out a restorative project alongside police and countryside rangers. And the force has also provided sessions at the local schools to educate people and warn them of the dangers of becoming involved in offending. That leads me on to community engagement. Force engages with the public in a range of different ways. We use multiple engagement platforms such as Durham and Darlington Engage. We use also Facebook, which is really successful in terms of reaching thousands of people every week. And any member of the public can also contact the neighbourhood officer directly on police.uk, and they will receive a response within 72 hours once we understand what their issue is relating to antisocial behaviour. PACT, our police and community together meetings, have been embedded in the force for well over a decade, and we hold regular meetings regularly every month with residents to identify priorities and agree local action plans. We conduct stay safe operations, which specifically engage with young people in communities during peak times to prevent ASB and provide safeguarding for young people. Durham Agency Against Crime works in schools to educate young people and also provides a really strong police cadet scheme. And again, the picture on screen there shows South Moor together. This was developed by the community and not the force, and I think it's really important to recognise that. Its aims are to take collective responsibility to restore pride within the village, create a strong sense of safety, and bring about and encourage residents in creating a community that everyone feels welcome and pulls together to support each other. This is something that the force supports strongly, and we've helped with a range of initiatives, including litter picking, community walkabouts, and projects that have been directly put in place to deter young offenders. That takes me on to the last slide, which is about hotspot policing. We, of course, cannot be everywhere at all times. We simply do not have the resources to do so. It's therefore critical that we target our resources effectively and efficiently. Operation PAVE was mentioned earlier, a really successful programme of work last year, where the force targeted specific locations with a focus on town centres with high levels of ASB, using coordinated enforcement and prevention activity with our partners, and we saw significant reductions of antisocial behaviour in many areas. We used targeted visible patrols at key times, otherwise known as hotspot policing. This is a methodology that we've used over many years and is very effective, where we patrol for short periods, sometimes just as short as 15 minutes at key times and key locations, but it's very effective at deterring ASB. In force, we use our tactical force and local tactical coordinating groups to target that activity, where we direct our resources based on intelligence and demand. There is a clear focus on repeat individuals, repeat victims, and repeat locations. And again, that's where our tactical tasking processes are effective. We, of course, also engage with our communities to help shape that hotspot activity and maintain public confidence. And the force is critically developing some applications that track patrol activity so that we can feed back to communities exactly when and where our officers patrol and what action has been taken to address ASB. So in conclusion, the force is committed to tackling ASB alongside our partners and critically in conjunction with our communities. Antisocial behaviour makes people feel unsafe, it damages communities, and it can have a devastating effect on victims. The force will not tolerate ASB, and we remain determined to be the best at preventing ASB nationally. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve, and for giving us such a comprehensive overview of the work that's being done in the communities and with partners, and some of the challenges that we face. But I think it is about that collective responsibility, and the community do have a big part to play in helping us respond and address and tackle ASB. So now I'm just going to go over to the questions. Just a little bit of feedback as well from where we went to with the questions. As we mentioned, that despite 98% of respondents to the question stating they have experienced or witnessed antisocial behaviour, 53 went on to say they didn't report it, with the highest reason, as I've mentioned, they didn't think anything would be done. I think we've hopefully reassured the public from our presentation and the support that you've done, and also these questions about it is really important that people do report it, so we understand where the pinch points are, where the issues are, and we can address it. So if we're looking at the questions, I'll move on swiftly to those, because we've got quite a few, and I'm absolutely delighted that this session for the public accountability meeting probably has generated the most questions that we've had since we've been doing these questions to the force. So the first question is, given that antisocial behaviour is one of the most visible issues affecting our communities, what is your strategy to increase public trust and confidence, and how is antisocial behaviour handled?
So, Commissioner, I'll jump in and pick that up. It's Kieran Irving. So at the start, our strategy is absolutely to focus on visible policing in the right areas, working with our partners to deliver problem solving, and seeking to reduce repeated harm, and using communication so our communities can see what action's been taken. Steve's already mentioned much of that as part of the main presentation. We do therefore prioritise the places where ASB is the most visible, including our bus stations, our parks, our town centres, our retail parks, our open spaces, places where young people and others who are committed towards antisocial behaviour are known to congregate. We use force data systems to assist in that, and specifically new data visualisation that we have. And of course, that then points back to the importance of matters being reported to the police so that we can act appropriately against those hotspot areas. And we couple that with the local knowledge of our dedicated officers in our neighbourhood teams to determine which places we should patrol most regularly and most routinely to maximise the impact that our patrols have. It's of note that we have a significantly higher percentage of PCSOs in this force area set against the national average, and our commitment to growing the size of our neighbourhood teams, which have over doubled in terms of police constables in the last 6 to 12 months, shows that our commitment to tackling antisocial behaviour is strong and firm. We know that confidence improves when communities can see what we're doing and they can see that the results that we've achieved and see that they're reported, and we'll continue to do that through all the means available to us, including PAC meetings, broader engagement and some of the digital channels that we've opened up in the recent past.
Thank you. And I think it's just sort of in part of that the presentation, I think you can see that, you can feel it, and I think those opportunities that we have to engage with the community, because some of the, like you say, the solutions to some of the problems exist in there. And I think again it's that wider partnership work, and I think just setting out those issues is really important, and that we're addressing it and targeting the areas as we do. So thanks for that, Kieran. My second question is, what evidence is driving your identification of antisocial behaviour hotspots, and how are you ensuring that the resources are deployed at the times and the locations of highest harm and risk?
Yeah, I'll pick this one up, Commissioner. So we've spoke a few times about that force incident data visualization. In short, for us in layman's terms, that's using a package called Scout, which is developed in-house. We're really heavily invested in that over the last couple of years, and it's now truly manifesting itself to real practical operational use for our neighbourhood teams. What does that allow us to do? Well, for our neighbourhood officers and the neighbourhood teams who are out there in our community, it allows them to use all the analysis that gains to devise patrol maps. It does it by using the instant data that we get, and it's something called time-weighted analysis. And again, just in simple terms, what does that do? It effectively highlights where the most prevalent locations are for antisocial behaviour, and it also breaks it down by hours. So it uses a red, amber, green rating at each hour of the day to show where those peak periods are. You can use date timestamps to do that, so you can afford yourself the opportunity to create very bespoke plans. So practically that allows the neighbourhood teams to be really targeted in where they're patrolling. For the likes of, say, myself and Steve, who have the force oversight and accountability of antisocial behaviour, it then is really useful for us to see direction of travel on antisocial behaviour. We can use that data as well and sanitize it so that it can be shared with partners in a really meaningful way. Obviously, we're dead keen that it's not just about our own data, so we also rely on community intelligence that the teams may get just from walking about and engaging with the community. The teams are really experienced as well. Nobody knows their area better than them from a policing point of view, so we really trust their professional judgment as well to police the hotspots that they know are causing the biggest challenges in our communities. We rely on other things such as use of our PAC meetings. So Steve mentioned them in his presentation, and those are effectively those more formal meetings that we have with the community, normally monthly, at a set location, and we'll get feedback there. Again, if we're out at some of our bigger community events, we'll make sure that we engage and we listen to our community at those events. And we use digital engagement through things like the Force website and the reporting portal.
Thank you. And I think this is going to be a sort of constant theme from myself as the Commissioner, is, going back to how I framed the questions. If the 53% aren't reporting the incidents in, it means that we aren't getting those pieces of the jigsaw. When we target resources, we need as much information, intelligence to drive our the work that we do and tasking and coordination. So it's really a plea to the public to continue to feed that in, especially what we've seen with the off-road bikes. Very, very important that we know the dates, the times, and the sites of where they're being identified, because again those operations are fed by intelligence, and they're having the success. And I think that also feeds in with the drone activity that we do, that I'm sure we'll touch on as well. The next question is what is the end-to-end process for reporting antisocial behaviour, and how are you measuring response times, resolution rates, and victim satisfaction at each of these stages?
Yeah, so I'll stay on and so that one. So I'll try and break it up into those 4 areas that you've referenced in the question. So the reporting, the response time side, resolution, and victim satisfaction. So I'll try and break it through those 4 primary areas. So in terms of reporting, there are several routes, and typically there's no one specific direction that I'll give in terms of which one to use, because it really does depend on the nature and urgency of what's ongoing. But hopefully, if I take a little bit of time to explain the different routes, it'll give some context to help people understand the best routes. So I would say for things that are happening now and that are ongoing, the main route would be through the force control room, either for 999 if it is perceived by the people observing activity that there's an immediate threat, or there's risk or harm. Most incidents, more commonly though, can be reported via the non-emergency contact routes into our control room, where the risk is, or the incident is deemed not urgent. Once we get a report of a call, the call handlers are really skilled in assessing the information that we get from our communities through those calls, and they'll effectively define an appropriate grading for the response. Those responses are either immediate, the priority, or scheduled incidents, and effectively that is just a scaling grade from we get there straight away on blue lights down to we get there as a pressing need, but probably not as a full emergency response, to then things that we may be able to deal with more slower time. We do also receive reports of ASB through the force website, and they tend to go direct into our neighbourhood policing teams, and we have a guaranteed 72-hour turnaround to report back to people who've reported incidents that way. So they're often useful for slower time, ongoing or repeat issues, or where the problem might not require an emergency response, but is something that we definitely want our dedicated neighbourhood policing teams to take ownership, to really engage with that problem solving and partnership intervention that the Chief Constable and Steve have clearly articulated. We know that the form can take a few minutes to fill in, but if people are patient and just afford that time, it really helps us when we have that first contact. But obviously, folks, don't worry if there's any gaps, we'll just fill them in when we speak to you. I've mentioned about through that contact, how we understand what's going on. This is then exactly the same way that people can report antisocial behaviour to us. So if it's through those more sort of structured packed meetings, we'll often get things reported through your counsellors, might be through community events, social media, referrals from other partners such as local authority colleagues, schools, housing providers. As you can see, the list really does go on. There's almost no right or wrong way. Whatever works for people, please use what works for you. We've all sort of mentioned a couple of times about that underreporting, and of course I'll wholly echo the sentiment that please do report, because it massively helps us to under wider context into recurring problems, and really helps us hone where we're going to target our patrols for those repeat locations or repeat groups. So that's the reporting bit. I hope that gives clarity for that. In terms of the response time, so we track those through Scout, which is, just to repeat, is where we have all of our data analytics in the force. So we get really clear dashboards in terms of response times for that. I'm pleased to say that the current position for ASB is strong, and across all of the force areas, we do achieve our attendance expectations for those immediate calls, priority calls, and scheduled ASB incidents. Resolution's a little bit more of a challenge to measure. So when we're normally dealing with crime, we have very specific crime outcomes, but because antisocial behaviour doesn't have that, what we find is it can be a little bit more challenging to measure. But really, we're just looking for some pretty straightforward things. What I would say is we do sometimes find that recurrent antisocial behaviour issues do take a little bit longer to fix, and we've spoke about how we have to engage with partners. Often each partner bringing their specific powers into play to help challenge the issue. So in terms of what do we look for to try and test ourselves to see whether or not our interventions are improving the situation, obviously direct feedback from the people who are being targeted or are observing the antisocial behaviour. We'll look for whether we're getting a reduction in calls or intelligence in relation to those areas. We'll be looking at things of how much targeted patrol activity are we doing. We'll look to see, do we think our ASB powers have been used properly and positively across the partnership? And if so, make a bit of an assessment as to whether they're working well. And again, when we're sitting in those meetings or we're having that community engagement, when the teams are out and about, we'll just see whether or not the communities continue to raise the same type of issues. We do work on victim and community satisfaction, and we get feedback through all of those channels that I've mentioned in terms of how we engage. So I shan't repeat them all, but we look for other things such as bespoke survey work. Steve and I and the rest of the Chief Constable's team, we have had some conversations about how we improve that. So Steve mentioned the neighbourhood alert app, which is Durham and Darlington Engage. We're going to start using that a little bit more because that's a really good platform for us to send surveys out, for us to have two-way engagement with our communication. So effectively, what am I trying to articulate there? It's that we do as much sort of engagement and surveying as possible and listening to our communities through different routes just to make sure that we're doing what they expect, explaining how we do it and holding ourselves to account that we're doing things in a timely manner for our communities.
Thanks, Richie. Can I just ask, is the Durham alert keeping the know? Has it changed? Just so I think it's just for the public. I think it's really helpful to get people to be signed up to do that, or is that something different?
It is one and the same, Steve. I will bring you in terms of where we are with regards to that sort of launch, but it's exactly the same product.
That's great. We'll come on to that. Obviously, she will touch upon it because I think that's one of the things I was going to encourage people to do as well. So somebody's at the end of the meeting, I'll pick that up. Also, very, very important, I just want to say about, you talked about, Richie, the information and the intelligence you get from councillors and partners and the public just ad hoc sometimes when and I think that's the importance, isn't it, of that neighbourhood patrol where people will just stop and tell you things, or you go into a shop or you have an engagement opportunity with young people and they tell you things that they might not report. And I saw, at the weekend, it was absolutely, the team did an amazing job at Hopetown. I must have had hundreds of people, and the amount of engagement that the team were doing, they did an absolutely sterling job. And the same in Stanley. And I think there's people who were actually approaching the officers, like PCs and PCSOs, that might not have otherwise have done that. And I think it was a real community boost. I think obviously the weather was very helpful as well, but I could see that in action. So as well as saying it, you can see it, you can feel it. And I'm sure we all came away with a lot more information and intelligence than we did when we arrived. So before I just move on and I bring my Chief of Staff in, just wanted to touch upon again what some of the respondents fed back to me when we asked some of the questions around antisocial behaviour. Not surprisingly, their priority would be to stop and prevent the behaviour happening again, and that was like 45% of respondents would want us to prevent the antisocial behaviour or repeat antisocial behaviour, followed by visible police or partner response, which was 28%. And I think the open text question is really helpful to highlight the need and the support for more police on the streets to tackle antisocial behaviour, with many people, as you've said, touching upon young people and those engaging in antisocial behaviour. And I think that's where our office and the force work really hand in glove with that, to identify the problem solving approaches to divert and deter some of that behaviour. So Andrea, I'm just going to hand over to you, because I know you've got a couple of questions that you would like to put to the force too.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the next question, Deputy Chief Constable Kieran Irvin's already mentioned in relation to antisocial behaviour around bus stations and parks, which is obviously one of the issues that came up from the public. But the question is, how are the police patrol strategies being adapted? Now, I think you have mentioned some of that already, Richie, to ensure regular visibility. And I think the main question here is around how officers are balancing enforcement with that constructive engagement to prevent escalation.
Yeah, so I'll more focus on that second bit, because just to reiterate that the first part of that question, I've hopefully covered off how we do that patrol planning and how we use our wider partners, our own systems to really target that. So in terms then of that broader enforcement and escalation route, so like most other ASB that we deal with, you know, in the specific examples being around bus stations or parks, we do just need to use the full suite of tools available to us. So as we've said on more than one occasion, that's working with our partners, it's being visible at the right times, it's really trying to garner further community intelligence, to try and hone down who are we dealing with, what times, where specifically are the problems occurring. Clearly, enforcement is part of that, and I'll come on to talk about how we use that as a graded response. We use a phrase of capable guardianship in the police, and in short, what does that mean? That's just the people who have an influence around, in the example that you give, potentially youth ASB. It's about putting an onus on those people who have that guardianship around children and young people to really do their role as well. So that can be working with families as an example. Clearly, we try and educate, be it those with that capable guardianship or, of course, the young people themselves. So in terms of enforcement, we normally try to use a graduated route. So like I say, it's that engagement, that school liaison, youth support, where we explain the impacts on communities to young people. And then, as we do potentially need to escalate, we can use dispersal powers. So those are quite wide-ranging powers where we can move sort of large groups of people from areas where there may be antisocial behaviour. We can then be a little bit more targeted at particularly at an individual level for those people who are more persistent. So we can use civil powers, and Steve mentioned quite a few of them in his presentation and gave some statistics around that. We can work with housing providers to take tenancy action, and if required, if we're talking about things such as off-road bikes, we can look at seizure and prosecution. Probably worth just giving a little bit of an example of this. So towards the end of last year and beginning of this year, we started getting significant reporting around Durham bus station. And after a lot of partnership work, we found some real effective use of all those examples that I gave above, resulting in a 50% reduction in antisocial behaviours. That was really just that culmination of partnership effort, visible patrols, really understanding who are those people who are the most prevalent offenders, working with businesses, educating people involved. And that's really what we want to be about. We're always conscious of that area that you've mentioned as well, Commissioner, about the underreporting. So in the Durham example, the neighbourhood police inspector, Inspector Pete Newman, went out and about to speak to the businesses on North Road, just to make sure that this wasn't a lack of confidence and it wasn't underreporting. And in the case in point with this, we're pleased to say that they all reported that they were feeling improvement.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Moving on to the next question, we've already mentioned around meaningful action and how that information gets fed back to the person who's reported in. But a question is around how do communities, so rather than on an individual basis, how do we get that information out to community? So how do people know what can they sign up to and things like that, so that they've seen that the force are acting and obviously reporting on those results as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep this one as well. So in terms of it, what we know, because our communities tell us, and I know obviously through the Commissioner's office, there's been academic research done around antisocial behaviour. We know that our communities want to hear about outcomes and not just activities. So we really are trying to focus how we communicate with our communities, telling them what we've done, not just that we're out and about patrolling. So we really tell them that where we are, why we're visible in a certain area, tell them about activities such as potential seizures, the warning notices that we may have given out, that tenancy action that I've referenced, dispersal orders, closure notices, and how that's reduced incidents. In terms of specifically how, so our local neighbourhood teams have a really strong footprint on social media. We use the website for updates, obviously those packed meetings, those wider partner engagements. So we'll brief our local councillors to really try and feed back those outcomes back into our communities. We've referenced about really reinvigorating the use of keeping the know. Durham and Darlington Engage is where we're branding it now, to encourage that two-way platform. We know I've referenced to social media posts. We're getting reaching to tens of thousands across the force on that. So that's really, really positive for us. We're conscious to not make everything about digital updates, because we know that some people either choose to not use platforms such as that, or may not have access to that. So this is where we try and do when we're out and about in our communities through those dedicated neighbourhood policing teams. So that's those packed meetings. We have things such as cuppa with a copper, which are often more, think of them as sort of drop-in sessions. So they might not be as formal in terms of time and location as those packed meetings. And we've given a couple of good examples about where we go to those larger community events in our communities, where we can speak to a lot of members of our community in one location. So events such as the Emergency Services Day that we held in Darlington, and things like the upcoming Activities Week in Chester, which I think if you're from that area, you just know that's gone from strength to strength. So we're places like that where we know our communities are going to be.
So lots of different areas people can engage in that two-way process. That's great, thank you. Next question we get asked quite a lot in the office of the PCC is around what constitutes ASB. So what's antisocial behaviour, what's harassment, what's crime. So could you just explain a little bit more around that shared understanding of what counts as ASB? Thank you.
So I'll pick that one up, Andrew, if I can. You know, an antisocial behaviour, indeed, you're right, covers a broad range of issues. You know, at one end, it can involve persistent behaviour that really does affect people's quality of life, affects their safety, their confidence actually to go out and about in the local communities, which is a terrible way to be. But at the other end, it can be a one-off passing incident that might just be frustrating or concerning, but maybe doesn't need the same policing or partnership response over a longer time period. It's important to mention, though, that in law, not all areas of antisocial behaviour actually even sit with the local police force for response, intervention or prosecution. And that's why we're trying to be clearer when the public do think about ASB, when they report it to us and who is best placed to deal with it. Importantly, recognising and sharing what people can expect from the force when they report it to us. Now, our improved website, which is part of the National Single Online Home structure, provides information on different types of antisocial behaviour and helps guide people towards the most appropriate reporting route. Richie and Steve have already talked about the opportunity for increased and enhanced online reporting, and over time we will move into more extensive social media reporting to make it even more convenient and suitable for members of the public. And those reporting functions provide questions and prompts which help both set expectations and ensure that the report goes into the right place. This same principle applies when people contact us by telephone, which remains the overwhelming means by which people contact the police force. Call handlers conduct an assessment based on threat, harm and risk, and we call that a Thrive assessment. And at the conclusion of that assessment, they'll explain the likely grading of the incident and what response the caller can expect. Now, of course, we would love to get to everybody's incident really, really quickly, but in some cases, particularly if an incident has dissipated and it's been reported historically, it might not be an appropriate use of resource for us to respond so quickly. And potentially, if the ASB is not in a single category of demand, where it can involve police, local authorities, housing providers, schools, health colleagues, youth services, licensing, environmental services, or any combination of all of the above, then it often means we might want to take a considered approach so we can put together appropriate problem-solving responses, which might not necessarily look like the police have done anything in the short term, but we will see longer-term outcomes and benefits to local communities. In terms of young people, our approach isn't ever simply about enforcement. We want young people to understand the impact their behaviour can have on residents, businesses and other young people in their local area. So for that purpose, our neighbourhood teams working with fire colleagues, local authority colleagues and others regularly engage with the schools. Our PCSOs are forever inside school assemblies, visiting classrooms, and then layering that above, as Richie described, attendance at community events, working with partners to identify young people who are on the cusp of involvement in antisocial behaviour before that behaviour escalates. So we work with the local youth justice services in both Durham and Darlington. We work more broadly with the local authority as well to try and keep people away and divert them from what we might describe otherwise as the wrong path. We've got graduated responses in place that begin with education and ultimately will end in enforcement where necessary. And there are several steps in between, including community protection notices, acceptable behaviour type approaches with parents and carers involved as well. And we'll do everything to divert young people away from the path of ASB, which could ultimately lead to criminality. We also recognise that it's important to engage in a positive sense as well. All too often the police are seen as the people who come and do bad things to bad people, but we want to make sure that we're seen in both in a balanced light. So examples that we have, such as the mini police set up and the volunteer police cadets, which run through your office, help us get really, really positive and strong messages across to young people in a different and non-threatening way. We're working currently to develop and deliver a programme into schools under the banner of POLED, which is a nationally accredited and acknowledged means of diverting young people away from the path of antisocial and or criminal behaviour. And we want to then leverage and use the peer-to-peer influence and the message that young people can hear from their own age groups in relation to the things that can take them down a wrong path, and trying to ensure that people stay on that right path. That they consider the safety of themselves and their peer group, they act with respect, and they understand consequences from other young people. These kind of messages will often land very differently from those which come from the police or other adults, because in very many cases and circumstances, we recognise that young people are turned off by a uniform, and it's important that they can hear those messages from people that they can empathise and those messages that resonate.
Thank you, Andrea, for asking the questions, and also for Kieran on answering those areas. Really important, and really appreciate the full answers that you've given so far. I've got a couple more questions to ask before we conclude, but just some feedback from what the public have said when we've asked the questions about antisocial behaviour. The majority of respondents stated that they have experienced or witnessed off-road bikes and e-scooters. 27% of those asked, with several open text answers also disclosed and seen young people on bikes or having to drive slower in order not to get involved in a collision. So just going on to the questions now, which does link to that. What is the operational approach to tackling the misuse of e-bikes and e-scooters, and how is the force balancing enforcement with prevention and education?
Yeah, I'll pick this one up as well. So in terms of our operational approach, it's very similar to a lot of the things that I've spoken about. So it really is using the reports that we receive from all of those different means that I've explained. Neighbourhood team knowledge, because again they see these issues as well, and really hone in and tackle those locations or those individuals who are causing the greatest harm or concern to our communities. Again, I've explained really how we use our systems to make sure that activity is targeted and not just responding randomly. We'll often conduct planned days of action and targeted response, where the neighbourhood teams will work alongside colleagues from the roads policing team, which will include our bike section, who have off-road capability as well, which means that we increase the chances of being able to catch people who are using off-road bikes illegally. We also use drones as well. They've been a really positive tool for us in terms of, the newer technology to help locate riders and identify where bikes are being stored. And that allows us to enable powers where we have them to seize these vehicles. So maybe a good example to showcase that's been in Darlington, where in one case we had two bikes causing significant concern, and that was being reported through community social media. The neighbourhood team went into that area, they spoke to the community, located and seized the bikes, and in that case we arrested the people who were deemed in possession of the bikes on suspicion of handling stolen goods. Again, that I think is the example of what we want to do in terms of working with our communities, listening to their problems, building the intelligence case, being seen to take action, and really use our enforcement and legal powers, not only against the riders, but actually also against those people who may store or facilitate, who store bikes or potentially facilitate the behaviour. Of course, we know that it's not just about enforcement on the road. So, and linking back to that last example, we really try to understand where bikes are being kept and where addresses may be linked to wider offending. And again, use all those things that we can, whether it's through working with tenancy powers, with partners, or criminal routes, to try and use whatever we can to seize these bikes, use all of our legislation in front of us, and potentially use things such as community protection powers through our partnership routes. We've referenced throughout that balance of enforcement with prevention and education. So we do run regular messaging campaigns to explain the law to people, to ensure that they understand the difference between those sort of bikes, especially the e-bikes that are overpowered, or the legislation around public location use of off-road bikes. all that stuff that I mentioned as well, in terms of working with schools, families, housing providers, partners in the local authority and community groups to reinforce consequences and risk, particularly around those people who are young. We are realistic about the challenge with e-bikes and e-scooters. They've become far more widely available over the last few years. We've noticed the prices are coming down, and they are becoming an increasingly common challenge for us and the wider partners that we work with. We do understand the frustration that communities can feel, because they may sometimes feel that things aren't happening if they don't see an immediate police deployment. But again, it would really just be for me to reiterate, please continue to report those issues. They will be logged. They'll help us build that intelligence picture. That helps us target the areas that we want to be, which means that our patrol plans are much better informed and our prevention activity in those targeted days of action are much more intelligent.
Thanks, Richie. And I think that's like really important. I think that example, that case study that you mentioned in Darlington, it just shows the power of local intelligence, because particularly when you're talking about the bikes and the off-road bikes, people will know where the bikes may be stored. They might know from the community who are riding the bikes. Sometimes where they ride them to, the people who don't know them there, but somebody must know who they are and where they're stored, and that information is really, really important. And as well, I think we've just alluded to that, as well as going through the 101 system or online or on chat, there's also the opportunity of reporting and sharing intelligence completely 100% anonymously via Crime Stoppers. And again, if somebody is wanting to give information and might be thinking about it, there is also that option of Crime Stoppers, which is 100% anonymous as well, and you get that intelligence as well into the area. The next question, it really touches on a lot of what Richie's just said there, so it may be to focus on the measurable impact. So I'll just read the question out, and then it may be just that we cover on aspects. So it's generally for rather than the e-bikes as well, but it says, what technologies, intelligence and powers are currently being used to identify and disrupt offenders, and what measurable impact have they had so far?
I think again, I'll pick this one up, Joy, if I may. And really just to reassure communities that we use a mixture of technology, intelligence and partnership information right the way across the board to help inform our use of ASB powers to identify and disrupt offenders in this environment. And the key point to raise is we're not relying on one tactic. We are adaptive, we are agile, and we recognise that the best results come when we combine the data, the local intelligence, the professional judgment, the visible patrols, the enforcement, the education, the partnership action to really get into the bones of those people who are determined antisocial behaviour offenders. From a tech and intelligence perspective, we use our Scout database, which we've talked a little bit about already. We analyse incidents, we use force performance data, our local problem profiles, we make use of CCTV where it's available. We have an extensive drone unit available to us now. Our off-road motorcyclists are even trialling their own safely ridden electric bikes in this space now, recognising the capability that we need to tackle the capability that is out there. We use social media and community intelligence, both in terms of responding and in a proactive, reassuring way. And our partner information sharing is really strong, where we look to understand better where ASB is happening, who's doing it, when it's happening, and whether we've got the same people, locations or victims repeatedly involved. In terms of powers and tactics, we're using a wide range of tools available to us, depending on the circumstances, and these will include, as we've already mentioned, community protection warnings and notices, acceptable behaviour contracts, dispersal powers in terms of local areas which are blighted by ASB, and then as we get more seriously along the path of criminal behaviour orders, vehicle seizures, and then looking to tackle people in different ways in terms of tenancy warning and enforcement, possession action by the local housing agencies, and then ultimately closure powers and then the broader development of public space protection orders. We've had great success with them in Durham and other areas across the force, and we're seeing them used to good effect. Ultimately, the right tool depends on whether the issues is individual behaviour, whether there's a repeat location, a premise, a tenancy issue, or a wider public space problem. And we look to work together with our partners to pick the right tool from the box on as many occasions as we can. And there's some real positive examples of where this combined approach is having an impact. Richie's already talked about the reduction of ASB in and around the Durham bus station and North Road area since the winter. That is looking to be a real success, and we're looking to replicate elements of that in our other bus stations as they exist across the force area. We've got another strong example of we engaged in a sweet trap over at Shotton, and that place had been linked to ASB, wider community concerns and offending. So between the neighbourhood teams, the licensing teams, both force and local authority, we were able to put in place a closure order there. And we don't use these powers lightly, but we will use them. You know, and we have got our eyes on multiple premises across the force who are causing us causing problems to our communities. So it'd be wrong of me to give a list, wouldn't it, in today's session and provide all the intelligence and give people a hint and a tip. But we are coming, and we are going to put your door in, and we are going to close you down if you carry on behaving in an inappropriate way. We've also seen this impact through tenancy and housing enforcement. Good examples exist for us in terms of Bishop Auckland, where people who are committing antisocial behaviour and or shop theft in and around the Tyndale Retail Park, where we can't get positive criminal justice outcomes for those individuals directly for their offending, we'll have a nibble at them through the local housing providers and make sure that their parents are held to account for the activity of their children, or indeed they're held to account directly. And we've seen examples where we've had tenancies revoked and people removed from their local area by virtue of that joint working. And then we'll continue doing that for as long as we need to.
Thanks, Kieran, and I think that's really important, and I think very, very, very clear message to those that are responsible for causing antisocial behaviour and crime in the communities and those who are facilitating it. I saw, you know, and I think that again, the very strong message around tackling antisocial behaviour that the executive team have given today. It is about using all the partners' tools and powers to address ASB. So it's not just about the police. I've seen firsthand on the high streets, there's a real focus from the government around high street crime. And the links to serious and organised crime. I saw the trade and standards officers going in and sort of tackling some of those issues supported by our officers. So as well as ASB, it's that crime, and sometimes it has an impact upon both of where young people are hanging around certain shops, but also linked to exploitation and crime. So I think that's a really clear message about where we are, the intelligence that we're using, and the adaptability that we are addressing to combat some of that issues. And a lot of the things that we've talked about as well is linking to the concerns around alcohol related ASB, and again using the work that we've got in our communities to tackle that, because it's responsible for a significant number of crimes linked to that part of antisocial behaviour. So on my final question, and this is a real good one from a member of the public. It says, if you were to prioritise one change in the next 12 months that would improve the outcomes and public confidence in tackling antisocial behaviour, what would it be, and how would you evidence its success?
So I think, Joy, I'm going to take this one as it's the final question. And as it's the final question, I'm going to be cheeky and I'm going to pick two. I'm going to give you one internal and one external. So internally, it is our plan to work really hard to strengthen the way we close the loop with communities after they report ASB. There is a lot of concern around it, and it's not just whether the police or partners are doing something, but it's whether the public can see it and feel that something's being done. Your survey reinforces that point really clearly. Many people who do not report ASB because they don't think anything will happen, quite often things happen in the background. So for us, it's important that we can present the outputs and the outcomes of what we've done. We've recently moved and developed what was Keeping the Know to be relaunched as the Durham and Darlington Engage with increased access to neighbourhood alert, and that's going to give us a much stronger two-way communication platform with our communities. So that whole thing about improving and increasing sign up for that platform will be really, really important for what we do. That will help us tell specific communities what we're doing in their areas, provide targeted updates on those local ASB issues, and share results from operations, because although we might not be operating in the park that is particularly nearest to one group of the community, we might be operating in the next park, which is dispersing and diluting the overall impact. We've had this system for quite some time, but the changes that we're proposing and we are making will give officers that improved access through the handheld devices and give us better understanding of its functionality. This means our neighbourhood officers and PCSOs will be able to provide quicker and more timely updates around the local issues that are affecting local communities, rather than relying so slowly on those more general email or the other routes that we've had in the past. Now, this matters because if residents do report off-road bikes or broader nuisance or any other disorder in their local area, it's really helpful if they can see that the police have done something, even if they don't actually see the police officer or the PCSO on that particular occasion. And that success will be seen in terms of the number of sign-ups we get to the system, our ability to use the management information that comes out the back end of the system, and ultimately a reduction in ASB in our local area. And ultimately, as we go further on, your further surveys will give us a big sense of the improvements that we make. So now to my second one, which is a little bit of a plea and a little bit of an ask of our local communities, and particularly focused at parents, guardians and carers. We've spoken a lot in this session in relation to broader antisocial behaviour, but importantly, we've spoken a lot about antisocial behaviour that involves young people, in particular those who are using e-bikes and high-speed scooters. So I would say to parents, guardians and carers, first of all, should you buy one? I'm saying no. Are you aware of their capabilities? If you have bought one, you really do need to understand that. Can you supervise their use? Because when they are wrongly used, they do cause real harm in our communities, and they are resulting in serious injury or worse, both for the riders, who are your children, and innocent passers-by. With the volume of this activity and the spread of it, it is far too much for us to deal with on our own. We need your help so that together we can combat the menace of these bikes. Thank you. Sorry, I just had to pinch the time for the last one.
You normally get 3 wishes, but you've got 2, and I think that's absolutely the second
I'll save the last one in the magic lamp for next time.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important to get that message out, because you think, how can you buy, the parent and the guardian responsibilities is absolutely key. And what we've seen in other parts of the country, the impact that this is having, and I think we can see it, as you said today, is important. I particularly like, what we talked about, the new tool and the relaunch of the Durham and Darlington Engage, because what I've seen, even just in the limited amount that it does in the local community, for those people who aren't on social media, they might be on email and text. And I think there's so much positive work going on in the community. It's a great way to have that engagement. And I've seen this, obviously the tool gives two-way engagement. You can even ask how useful was that information, and you can get feedback. So it's a two-way communication that it's used. And also it gives opportunity to get the fraud information out, from Action Fraud, comes straight from London, from Neighbourhood Watch. So really, welcome this development, because as well as getting the crime prevention, our information out, we can look at, how do we measure success? Where's the intelligence coming from? What do we need? And that information to prevent crime in the first place helps myself and the chief deliver first-class victim services, because if we don't have crime, we don't have victims. And I think the prevention aspect and the tool can really help drive that agenda. So I'm pleased you got the 2 in there, Rich, Kieran, because I think it's an important one to bring in, and I'm really excited about that development. So just before I sum up and close the public accountability meeting today, I just want to invite the Chief Constable in to reflect on any of the discussions to get today before I sum up and close the meeting. So Rachel, is there anything you want to add? There's some really good presentations and contributions from your team. Appreciate it. I'm sure that the public will too.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's been a long one, hasn't it? Because there is just so much going on and such a lot of detail. And we know there's more to do. We know that people still experience antisocial behaviour, but what we want to be clear about is the strength of our commitment to making a difference and the time, effort and resource that we're putting into it, and that we will do it together with communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. And really, just what I'd like to do is just sum up what I've heard today, but also, importantly, what we've been talking about when we're out and about in the community, and what I've listened to when I've been out into the towns and villages and the city. You know, we know antisocial behaviour and serious violence don't just disrupt lives, they devastate them and leave lasting scars on individuals and families. And entire communities. And you know, it's true, that saying is, it's like living a nightmare. And like antisocial behaviour, if it's occurring in your community, it's there 24, could be there 24/7. It's there when you go home. Your home is often, you know, people say it's your castle, but it has an impact upon people's lives and how they go about their daily lives. So I'm really pleased, as the Chief Constable has said, it's been a long session, this one, but it just sort of demonstrates the prominence that we give to antisocial behaviour and to addressing what's always one of the top priorities for the community. So, you know, the targeted patrols, as we've seen, are making a difference. The extra officers and extra PCSOs are making a difference. We support, you know, the special constabulary and the work that they do to support the work within our operational aspects. So, you know, we do want to do where we are deterring offenders. We're bringing more criminals to justice and rebuilding that community confidence, so people feel able to report what is happening in their area. But again, as we've heard, enforcement isn't enough. If we are serious about cutting crime and reducing demand on public services, prevention is key, and it has to come first. And we have to work with partners and with the community to really get that messaging about how to prevent crime occurring in the first place. And that's why, together with partners, we're looking to tackle the root causes, steering offenders towards support that can bring change to their path and to stop the cycle before it starts. And at the same time, I'm clear, victims must see justice, they must feel heard, and they must feel that they are taken seriously. And so lived experience is very central to that mission. And with the new Ministry of Justice funding, I'm pleased to say that we've established a victim expert by experience panel to ensure victims' voices, including those affected by antisocial behaviour directly, shape how we respond and improve. And combined with the strengthened investment in our case review service, I'm really confident that the support available to residents in County Durham will set the standard nationally. But we cannot stand still. Antisocial behaviour remains a top priority, and it will take all of us working together to address the causes and to give people a better path to follow. So my message to residents and businesses is simple: keep reporting. We need the full picture to act decisively and to keep our community safe. I'd like to thank everybody who has taken their time to send their questions in, to engage with us on Facebook and on social media. Particularly thanks to the Chief Constable and the Executive for taking us through the presentation and answering the questions so fully. So finally, just to conclude, thanks to everyone who's watching, thanks for listening, and please do get in touch if there's anything that you've heard or seen today that you'd like to have further information on. Thank you.
The recording's been